Back in 2019 and 2020, Disney was making a lot of moves to update the parks. At the time, the parks were doing fantastic, but that doesn't mean that they were making all the right decisions. In fact, a beloved attraction was almost replaced with a completely different beloved IP. Let's talk about the ride that almost was, that was axed in favor of covering up Jessica Rabbit here on That Park Place. Vash is going to lead this story, and I know what you're thinking whenever we talk about a new ride going into the park. First of all, whatever you're thinking is there. I'm not going to say that it's safe because Disney might come after it with something else, but this one does come to mind.
Where? Where, Dwight?
Vash, it's all yours, bud.
Thank you. Well, where is correct. And, well, where is very interesting in this case because it wasn't left truly unscathed. Even though this plan didn't actually end up going forward, well, we'll get to that point in just a moment right here. But via DTVA News here on Twitter, concept art for a proposed DuckTales 2017 attraction who was set to replace Roger Rabbit's cartoon Spin at Mickey's Toontown at Disneyland in California circa 2020. The pitch was scrapped due to COVID-19 cuts at Imagineering. This comes via the Unbuilt podcast. You can kind of see some of this artwork right here. This is a very, very interesting proposal or idea that was, from what we understand, this close from actually being approved. This would have totally transformed or reimagined Roger Rabbit's cartoon Spin at Disneyland in not too dissimilar fashion that we just experienced with Tiana's Big Adventure taking over Splash Mountain. So I thought that was very appropriate, Jonas, to lead the discussion off with that. Unbuilt, an unrealized theme park podcast, their official account says, here's another piece of revised art for the slated DuckTales attraction. Thanks to Hello Miro for YouTube for the help. You can see right here, the multiple rooms, all of this lines up with the layout for Roger Rabbit's cartoon Spin, so there wouldn't have been much change in that. But you can kind of see and get an idea for this specific project. Now, Laughing Place has a few more details actually gleaned from this podcast, which is about an hour and a half on your popular podcast platforms. New podcast reveals DuckTales almost took over a popular Disneyland attraction. This by Tony Betty at Laughing Place. A new episode of the theme park related podcast focused on unbuilt theme park attractions has shocked many a Disney fan with their latest entry, revealing that a popular Disneyland attraction had a big bullseye on it more recently than you might think. The guys over at Unbuilt and Unrealized Theme Park Podcast have dropped a bombshell that will have many fans of Disneyland Park breathing a sigh of relief. According to the latest episode and related post on X, Walt Disney Imagineering was this close to replacing Roger Rabbit's cartoon Spin in Mickey's Toontown with a ride based on the recent Disney Channel reboot of DuckTales. The climax of the attraction was a battle with Magica Dispel, along with other fun moments, including a send-up of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. So this is very, very interesting. The dates that aren't blurred reveal that the art, also labeled a work in progress, dates to March of April 2020, with the podcast citing COVID as the main reason this attraction was never actually ended up happening. However, other DuckTales-based projects were announced and then later canceled elsewhere in the Disney theme park universe. Most notably, at one point, Epcot's long-dormant and inevitably shelved Play Pavilion was slated to feature a virtual water balloon fight based on the show. That was later subtly changed to favorite Disney characters before being shelved altogether.
So let me give you a chance to breathe there, Vash, and also point out DuckTales at the time was in season 2 or 3 of its big reboot at the time, and they actually did a pretty good job with that reboot. And it was a tribute to the original. They changed a couple of things, and I didn't like it, but the quality was there. It was generally pretty funny and clever and in the style of the original one. The original one still exists and is awesome. And part of that comes from the Carl Bax. Is it Carl Bax that did the original series of DuckTales comic books back in the day? They had this rich lore to pull from in order to do these shows. And anyways, not to get too much on a tangent on the history here, but this was a big hit, and most Disney fans agreed that this was a big IP for the company, whether or not they wanted to do anything for it. But all of the oxygen in the room was being soaked up by franchises like Star Wars and Marvel and whatever they were doing with the Disney live action remakes. So while Disney actually had something that could be cultivated and turned into a large boon for the parks, something that no one else can do, instead they moved on from it.
Yes, they did move on from it, but there was a real big push, Jonas. I think you actually keyed into something that was very, very interesting, because there's a big push at around that time to really proliferate this specific franchise in the parks specifically. You can kind of see right here, Walt Disney World confirms DuckTales World Showcase Adventure is coming to Epcot later this year. This was a post by Scott Gustin of September 26, 2022. So as late as that, they were really trying to get this franchise in anywhere that they could. Now, here's the twist of the story that I don't think Unbuilt actually made the connection to, because you'll note, actually, Culture, when they reimagined Toontown recently, they actually had some DuckTales tracks in the actual loop, the music loop that actually played there. A lot of people were very surprised that that was actually included. That kind of gives us an idea that this was pretty late in the game kind of thing here, and I think Unbuilt is exactly right. They were just about to go ahead and approve this. Well, what's interesting is that, let's see here if I have my notes. Yes. So in April 2019, the company, via Josh D'Amaro here, he was actually the president of Disneyland before he became parks chairman, Walt Disney World in between there, announces that Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is going to be coming to Toontown. And then everybody kind of was like, okay, well, maybe we get some other stuff along with this. Well, yes, we do. It wasn't until 2021 at IAAPA that Disney, Josh D'Amaro, now the chairman of the Parks Division, actually comes out and says, yes, Toontown will be reimagined here. The chairman surprised the audience with the announcement that Mickey's Toontown at Disneyland would be reimagined with more green space, Centennial Park area, and the Dream Tree takes inspiration from Walt Disney. We've covered this story before. But then on 2021, November, that is, we get our first look at our artwork for this new reimagined Toontown. And a lot of people were kind of concerned because Roger Rabbit wasn't actually in this piece of artwork right here. And everybody's like, oh, what's going to happen to Toontown? This is going to be Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin wasn't featured in this artwork for Toontown. So a lot of people were like, what's going to happen to Roger Rabbit? Kind of see that right here. This should be way off to your right, and yet it was nowhere to be found. Well, we got our answer in December of 2021 of that same year. Jessica Rabbit was announced to have a new leading role within Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin. So my guess here, the theory that I have is, I'm thinking they were going to go forward with this DuckTales reimagining of Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin. They couldn't because of COVID-19 funding. All the projects were cut. We know what happened with Epcot, how that was truncated and so forth. A lot of funding was cut for a lot of projects all across the line. I think DuckTales at Roger Rabbit was one of those, but as a compromise, they decided to put Jessica Rabbit in a trench coat and retheme the attraction that way. So I don't think it was left unscathed.
Literally,
I think.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they literally wanted to destroy the entire ride just because of Jessica Rabbit. I mean,
yeah,
right, exactly. I think that was the way they were going with this attraction. You can kind of see right here they've taken her out of the damsel in distress kind of characterization that they had for Jessica Rabbit, and then they put her in a trench coat and put her in a more empowering role where she's actually the detective trying to solve this case right here.
Anyone who doesn't say that Jessica Rabbit is a strong character is fooling themselves. She's manipulative and she's powerful in her own way, whatever you want to say. Obviously it's playing to a more crass idea, but she is a character who has control of her own destiny.
I'm not bad.
Right.
I'm just drawn that way.
That's it right there. Hey, Vash, for anyone who is not a Disneyland person, can you is Roger Rabbit still functioning out there?
Roger Rabbit Cartoon Spin is still functioning with these changes. I think they kept the ride, if only to make the modifications that made it more PC or politically correct. Now, again, it could have been a whole lot different, playing out like we just saw with Tiana's Bayou Adventure taking over Splash Mountain. But I think there was a compromise here by not only Imagineering, but also maybe Stories Matter initiative people who might have also wanted to see this DuckTales reimagining actually be installed here. This is what we got. And now there's a whole new storyline here where Jessica Rabbit's a detective joining alongside the adventure, and all of the negative depictions of her have just been washed away, or at least negative from a Story Matters initiative perspective. So I think this is a really interesting story because it's like they were definitely looking to get rid of Roger Rabbit for sure. I don't think there's any question of that, but I don't think a lot of people have made the connection that as a compromise to not doing that, Jessica Rabbit got the axe. It came out of left field when we heard about Jessica Rabbit being reimagined. It was like, whoa, didn't really have that on our radar. And a lot of people were upset about it at the time, and rightfully so. But now we know it might have actually been connected to this story here of a DuckTales attraction. Very, very interesting.
I think what's also really interesting about this is that what we're seeing here is that they canceled this because their funds were running up with COVID. So I think that kind of goes to the state of the Walt Disney Company in general, that they are financially struggling.
Yeah, they definitely had some significant cash flow issues at this time. Remember, all their parks were closed. They couldn't release their slate of movies in theaters, all kinds of stuff. Go ahead, John.
No, this is also, though, when the company was at its highest in stock price. So if they put up anything as collateral at this point, it would have been the time to get loans if they were going to get loans to fix the park. The thing I find interesting here, and forgive me if I end up repeating myself a little bit. This was a show, DuckTales was a show that was a hit on Disney Channel, and they put it on Disney Plus eventually. And then the Mickey Mouse, that is the Paul Ruddish version of Mickey Mouse, which is, I'm going to say it is very creative. It's grown on me a lot over time. Some people call it Ren and Stimpy Mickey Mouse, though. It was much more controversial when it comes to Disney fandom because it's a more mischievous Mickey. It's a little grosser. It's that culture. Would you call that a Cal Arts style?
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's a Cal Arts style, and that's really destroying animation and art right now, and it has been for like a decade and a half.
It's ugly.
Yeah, it's ugly as sin.
Yeah, and so you
weird stuff with the show too, though.
They did. Yeah, they definitely did. It was much more subtle at the time, but definitely made note of it.
I feel like I remember reporting on it.
Yeah,
because they introduced them like they had like a Boy Scout storyline.
Yes, the Boy Scout storyline. They have the two dads in the background of one of the scenes, and they can't just have two dads. They also have to have T-shirts that make it very clear, I'm with Dad and I'm with Dad. And there's something that on the nose in the background of the show. Also, some of the characters they put enough in there for some of the shippers to really attach to in this show. Now, the thing that I'm trying to point out here with you have the Mickey Mouse, which is controversial and not necessarily liked by everyone, and you have DuckTales, which had almost universal appeal. But they chose the Mickey Mouse ride there, and they passed on the DuckTales ride for budgetary reasons.
Yeah, I think the reason why they did that was because in 2020 they were already very much moving on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway for Disneyland. They had already moved a lot of backstage areas, back of house behind Toontown. In order to accomplish that, they already had construction materials all lined out. Like they went forward with that because I think they were already bought in. But I think the one that was not so far along that they could stop was the DuckTales attraction. And like I said before, I mean, you saw the connection to a more PC-friendly IP, let's say, than Roger Rabbit was. I think they were really wanting to install that, but they compromised by taking what they felt was questionable out of that attraction, which was really unfortunate because, yeah, I thought Jessica Rabbit was very empowering in that attraction specifically because she gets one over on the weasels who kidnapped her before. So can't can't necessarily have that, I suppose.
Well, they don't like good-looking women. That's just a fact.
Yeah, credit to Unbuilt Pod for the original story right there. Like I said, if you know how Disney works, you can kind of connect the dots here. And it was kind of interesting going over the timeline of events because it all kind of lined up in this amazing fashion. I'm just thankful that we have Roger Rabbit here still at Disneyland, and it didn't get Tiana'd like Splash Mountain did.
Yet, that's right. As soon as they get some money, they're gonna promise to do that ride, and they're going to value engineer it into oblivion.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.